Hello YouTube, what is up? Connor Brooks here with another video for you. Today is not actually a review, but I'm actually introducing a series that I am starting right now. And from the title, you can obviously tell what that is. It's how to build an HO scale layout. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I am supposed to be building an HO scale layout for my dad's town's history museum. I'm hoping that still happens. With this coronavirus, everything has kind of been turned up on its head. So, I don't even know if that's still happening, but as of right now, it's supposed to be. So, plan on this plan on this series being kind of spaced out, but I decided that I was going to start today because I'm really not doing anything, and I decided I wanted to do a video. So obviously we have to start with the basics because there is quite a lot that goes into building a layout. If you've never done it, there's quite a lot that goes into it. And if you're a seasoned layouter, I guess that's a good way to put it, then you understand. Now, I'm first going to say that I got my inspiration from World's Greatest Hobby, how to build an HO scale layout. It's about an hour-long video, and it came out like a long time ago, but it's on YouTube, and I watched it probably 32 times before I built my layout. Most of those were for entertainment purposes, but once I decided I was going to build a layout, then I started watching it again. It's really helpful. It goes into everything that has to do with building a layout for beginners. So I'm going to put the link down in the description because I highly recommend that you watch that. I mean, obviously, I'm going to be telling you some stuff, but watch that video. Now, that video, of course, is for beginners, but I also think it's good. Now, if I end up building this layout for the museum, it's going to be my second layout. So I know the ins and outs, I guess you could say. I mean, I'm not perfect at it, but I know what I would do differently, what I wouldn't do again. So I thought I'd share these with you along with just general layout basics. So the first thing that you have to do before building a layout is actually get an idea in your head. So ask questions like, do you want to model a specific railroad? Or do you want to model a specific era or scene? Do you want to freelance it? Or do you just want some track to run trains? Personally, I started with that last one. I didn't really have an idea, nothing specific. I just wanted a layout. I wanted to run my trains. Now I'm starting to lean towards modeling RF&P. Excuse me. Of course, my layout isn't based on anything that RF&P had, but that's okay. And that kind of ties into freelance, which is taking a railroad and you have towns and scenes that are like realistic and prototypical, but the track plan itself isn't. But we're of course going to get more into that. So if you decide to model a specific railroad or scene, you're going to have to do research because you want it to be realistic and prototypical to an extent. Now, if you're freelancing, like I mentioned before, this essentially means that your towns and the trains that you run are based off of a prototype, but the track plan really isn't, and this is where you take modeler's license, which just is a fancy word for saying it's a model so you can do what you want and have fun with it, but that's exactly what you're going to do. You're going to do what you want and you're going to have fun with it, because at the end of the day, it is a model railroad layout, and you got to have fun with it a little bit. So, after this, after you have an idea in your head, you have to design your railroad, because that's a big important step. I promise you, just going at it and just throwing stuff together is not a good idea. So, before you even can design your railroad, you have to decide what size it's going to be. Personally, for beginners, I think 4x8 is a great starting point. I did 4x8. It's a great size. It's pretty big. I have, my 2-track main line plus this town and the yard turntable thing. Of course, other people can probably do a lot more because I used EZ Track, which we will get into. So If you're a seasoned railroader, modeler type person and you've built layouts before, or if you feel comfortable or confident in going bigger, or you have the space, of course, go bigger. I'm just saying that 4x8 is a good start. So designing your railroad can be done in many different ways. It can either be done, by hand, with like drawing it. Personally, my favorite is using a computer software. I used, I believe it's pronounced SCARM. It's SCARM, the Simple Computer Aided Railway Modeler. And I highly recommend that because it has all of the popular tracks along with other non-popular tracks in HO scale. And it also, you can have a 3D model of your layout. Once you design it in the 2D format, it can produce a 3D image. And you can create a baseboard, and at the end of the day, you can click a button and it creates an entire list of all the track and things that you use on your layout, tells you how many you did, so you can take that to the hobby shop or plug it in online and you can buy all that you need. Now, this brings us to our next topic. What track are you going to use? Now, personally, with beginners, I highly recommend Bachmann Easy Track, which is what I did. And that's what I did because I didn't want to ballast my track because I had no idea how to do that. So with the Bachmann Easy Track, it already has a pre-molded ballast on there. So if you're a beginner and you're not really big into, like having it super detailed, then that's what you need to do, because all you have to do is snap it together and then glue it. And so it's really easy. Now for my next layout, personally, I think I'm going to be doing like snap track or flex track and then creating my own ballast, only because that is more realistic, and for the museum I want to be more realistic, and I feel more confident in myself since I've done this. I feel like I can go to the next step. So, because like I said, I want realism, that's what I'm going to do with my next layout. So, if you're a beginner, use Easy Track. I really recommend that. Now, if you feel confident in ballasting track and all that, go ahead. And obviously, if you've done it before, then you know your limits. But this is just beginners, what I recommend. I think Easy Track is the best. Now, after you design the layout, this is probably the most important step and the one that I messed up. Decide where your layout is going to go. This is the time where you make space, you look, you say, okay, it can fit here, it can't fit here. Do you want to do it modular so you can take it down and put it under beds? See, that's essentially what we did. I have my layout cut in half so it can fit under the beds. Of course, now it has its permanent home right here, but if need be, we can move it. But I highly recommend finding a permanent home for your layout. If you're gonna super detail it or add buildings that are super tall, if you're not gonna do that, if you're gonna have it modular and you need to put it under beds, you can still detail it and all that. Just don't go like super into detail, and just use small buildings, because I learned the hard way that stuff tends to fall off when you're moving it up and down stairs, down and under beds. So if you're not that big into detail and you just want something to run your trains, then yeah, making it modular, able to move, it's pretty easy. Now, like I said, if you know you're gonna keep it somewhere stationary, then you should have some fun with it and go all out, because I was able to add a lot more detail now that it's in its stationary place. So, what's next? You have to decide how tall you're going to lay out, how tall your layout is going to be, as in like, after you decide where it's going to go, you have to decide what you're going to put it on. Are you going to put it on a table? Are you going to build your own base? In that video that I mentioned earlier, they talk about how you can build your own like base table, and your layout is kind of incorporated in that. So personally, I would recommend that. I did not do that for my layout, and I probably should. I'm gonna have to actually replace what it's on, because the board is starting to go like this on the sides, and in the middle it's kind of like that, which is not what you want. But that's also because I used thinner wood so that it would be lighter. Which then brings us to our next topic. Are you going to put your layout on just board, or are you going to do board and then foam? Now, personally, I am going to tell you, you should use foam. Only because it's really easy. You can put mountains, you can cut out lakes, you can stick things in it like trees, and it's really easy. Now, if you're planning on this just being super simple, like I have a layout that I built-ish for my cousin. It was like, it's just on a piece of board with the board painted gray, and the easy track is just nailed on. It's nothing special. It's just for him to run trains around. And so I didn't really need to do detail, so I just put it on the board, and it was really easy. Now, if you're going to detail your layout, you want to have lakes or mountains, just put it on foam. Foam is super cheap, and it goes right over the board and adds an extra layer to your train. Again, I think you should use foam, but do your research, and same with like what you're going to put your layout on. Just do some research, because there's so many ideas out there that other people have done. You can easily just copy their ideas or make your own, either one. So, now that you have thought of a plan, designed your layout, decided where it's going to go, and plan on what you're going to put it on, you now have to ask the biggest question, because you need to know this before you can start buying trains. Are you going to do DC or DCC? DC is super simple, and it's where you put a train on the track, and when you increase the throttle, the train moves, because it's based on the polarity of the track and the train connection to the track. But it's really only good for one train, unless you're running multiple trains on the same track, and like a consist. You can't run any trains independently, and no matter what's on the track, you increase that throttle, all the trains are going to move at the same time. Now, before I go into DCC, I'm just going to talk about the fact that DC is the cheapest option. So if you're on a budget, then I highly recommend that you use DC, because you only really need one train. You do one track. Instead of having a 2-track main line, you just have one track, which is cheaper. So if you're on a budget and you don't care about having sound or independent control of trains, then just do DC. Or if you're a beginner and you really don't want to go into that yet, then you can always, if you use EasyTrack, you can always upgrade to DCC. So if you're a beginner, maybe start with DC. Now, I'd been doing DC for a while, so I thought it was time to switch to DCC, which is our next thing. DCC, it's digital command control, so it's based on a chip inside the locomotive, and while, of course, you need the polarity or power of the track to run the train, it's based on an independent address of that locomotive. So the train will only run if that unique address is coded in. So this means that you can run trains, multiple trains independent of each other, and depending on your controller, you can have multiple trains. Like my MRC, Prodigy Advanced Squared Wireless, can hold 9,999 locomotives and or other things run by DCC. Like, for example, my turntable is completely run by DCC. So I personally am going to recommend DCC. Even if you don't want to have sound or anything, you can just have DCC, because if you're going to do more than a 1-track mainline, it's really easy and a lot better to be able to control those trains independently. So I'm going to demonstrate this on my layout, just so you can see what I'm talking about if you haven't seen it on my channel. But so this is the Prodigy Advanced Squared. I snipped the wires off of the Easy Command from Bachmann and just plugged them into the back, and it just plugs right on into the track. Now this is my Advanced Squared controller. If you want cheaper, use your Easy Command. I'll show you that when we go back over there. So you turn it on. Whoops. Almost dropped my phone. So as you can see, I do have sound on my trains. So one of the cool things about DCC is you have your independent, oh yeah, by the way, I have all my trains with their numbers. So like I said, unique address. Whoops, not 1282, 12. So only this train is going to move with this unique address, unless you have more than one train set to that address. So you can independently control lights, sounds, so as you can see, this train is moving, but these trains are not. So I actually have this in consist mode, so both of them run at the same time. But you can still control the separate trains. So, and while these trains are moving, so I'll get these trains moving as well. You can also continue controlling more things, like the turntable. While all these things are going on. So that is my demonstration for DCC. Even if you don't have sound, like I said, having DCC is still... Let's see if I can get my phone to stay where I had it last time. Maybe? I'll just hold it. So, now that you've decided if you're going to do DC or DCC, the last thing that you have to do is get your trains. Now, this is the most expensive part of the hobby, the trains. But like I said, DC is cheaper. They normally run under $100. DCC runs in the early hundreds. DCC and sound runs all the way from the late hundreds to the late, like, 300s. All depending on the train. There are some trains like Broadway Limited Brass Hybrids that go even higher than that. So if you're not really on a budget, then I recommend going sound, DCC, all that. If you are on a budget, either do DC or just DC. It makes it a lot easier. But I highly recommend doing all the things first that I said in this video before you buy trains, because I don't know, I did it the other way and I didn't really have anything to run my trains on, so it wasn't that fun. And also, this is where that research that you did earlier comes in. It comes into play, because if you researched a specific era or railroad, you have to know what trains they ran at that time. So, yeah, this is what I would consider the basics for a layout. These are the must-dos before you build a layout. So, like I said, this is going to be a series, so once I start building the layout, we will go into actual building, but I just can't do that right now, so please stay tuned. Watch that video that I mentioned. I'm going to put that link in the description. Really, I highly recommend watching that. So, stay tuned as the series progresses. Thank you for choosing my channel. Subscribe, comment, like the video. Have a great day. Bye-bye.